Fort Wilverton's commanding officer who had signed the contract had been a Colonel Coleridge. Not that she had any interest in making his acquaintance. That was one of the reasons she'd headed straight for the quartermaster's office instead of fort headquarters. Someone would eventually inform the colonel of her presence, but perhaps she would be able to make her escape with the survey team without meeting him again. How could she reintroduce herself to the famous army colonel when she'd broken his son's heart 5 years ago? "Captain Coleridge," she said, "will be as bound by that contract as you are." He pushed the paper at her as if afraid it might bite. "But you're a woman. Women aren't photographers." Meg kept her smile in place. "On the contrary, there are ladies right now who run photography studios in England, Germany, and New York." "Oh, well and good, ma'am," he said. "But we can't have women on a survey expedition." Now, that point she'd come prepared to argue. "Your commanding officer told my father in a letter that the cartographer's wife will be joining the survey." "Yes, but Mrs. Newcomb can cook," he protested, backing up until his shoulders bumped the rough wood shelves behind him, setting the canteen stocked there to rattling. "And I can take pictures," Meg informed him. "I see no difference." "You would if you knew Mrs. Newcomb," he muttered. Meg refused to dignify the comment with a response. She'd traveled more than 2,000 miles, by rail, wagon, and finally mule, to reach the fort. Corporal Dent couldn't know the danger she'd left behind, a threat to everything she'd ever known. She could still see the glitter in her aunt's green eyes as the family had returned from Papa's funeral. "You've been terribly cozened, Margaret," she said, leading Meg into her dingy little house in Norfolk. "As far as I can see, your father filled your head with nonsense about your place in the world. At 26, a young lady should be wed, with children playing at her feet." "But that would make it terribly hard to get the shot," Meg had replied. Aunt Abigail had not been amused. But then, Meg had learned, Aunt Abigail was never amused. Truly, had there ever been two more different siblings? Her father had been joyful, carefree, expansive in gesture, vocabulary, and choice of living. His widowed younger sister seemed grim, weighed down, and tight-laced in body and spirit. Her son, Meg's cousin, had been equally as restricted. "You can have no further use for that camera equipment," Cousin Harold had maintained, standing with his arms crossed over his broad chest in the door of the prison cell of a room they'd given her. "By rights, it should be mine. I'm sure I could get a pretty penny for it." Over her dead body? Neither of them understood. She loved the trade she'd been baptized into, the way the world opened through the lens of her camera. It was a challenge and an art to choose the exact right angle, the exact right light, to create something extraordinary out of the ordinary, to share a glimpse of the divine. How could they ask her, no, order her, to give it up, as if it were something shameful? Papa had refused to allow her gender to get in the way of their trade. He'd taken her with him to the edge of the battlefield and the wilds of the frontier. She'd met women who nursed wounded soldiers, taught natives to read and write, forged a home in untamed territory. She knew her life didn't have to be confined to the sitting room and the kitchen. Aunt Abigail and her son had other ideas. They seemed to view her gender as a limitation, and one that must never be overcome. She'd only met one other woman with such rigid ideals. A shame she'd been the mother of the man Meg had thought she might love. She'd tried to play the demure miss for a time when her father had had a studio. She'd taken tea in the afternoon, attended balls and soirees. She'd never